I'm John Batchelor. Professor Stephen Cohen of New York University and Princeton University, Russian History Emeritus, is here with me. And to find the way to our conversation tonight, I refer you to two pieces that Steve has published at thenation.com in these last weeks. One, Cold War Again, Who's Responsible? That's the original proposal of where we started after the Maidan turmoil and the flight of Yanukovych, and the present confrontation between Kiev and eastern Ukraine, and then the Crimean annexation. And the second, Cold War Against Russia Without Debate. Steve's observation with Katrina vanden Heuvel, who's the editor-publisher of The Nation, as well as Mrs. Stephen F. Cohen, that the American media has let down the American people by not entertaining the debate about the terms of the confrontation between Moscow and Washington. And now we enter the third player here. This is a triangle. The third player is Berlin. Steve was referring to the war over the Hitlerites in 1941-1945. It is true that Berlin leads European Union. It's the banker, it's the economy that matters, it exports, it's ferociously skillful in managing economic matters. Mrs. Merkel, as Chancellor of the Germans, as the head of a coalition, a grand coalition, is the de facto leader of the European Union. Her visit to the White House within these last days, April 25th, I believe, was the date. That visit is seen as very significant in the road forward. Mrs. Merkel speaks often with Vladimir Putin. She has the Russian. She was raised in East Germany while the Russians dominated the Soviets. Mr. Putin was trained as a German speaker when he was in KGB. He served in East Germany in his service. He speaks German. However, I'm told that these two leaders speak in Russian. Their conversations are ongoing. Several weeks ago, Mr. Putin said that he would no longer speak to Washington, to President Obama. And to my knowledge, they're no longer talking on the phone as they were in the first weeks. What is significant here is that the meeting between Mrs. Merkel and President Obama in the White House on that afternoon, and there was what followed was a press conference between the two world leaders, was very, very rough. Mrs. Merkel confronted Mr. Obama with questions about the American participation in the provocations in Kiev, in the Maidan violence of January, February. She also confronted, I'm told, Mr. Obama about the American participation or encouragement or funding or embracing of the aggression in eastern Ukraine by the Kiev forces. Some of them the same heroes of Maidan, I'm told, now Ukrainian soldiers. The conversations didn't go well. Mrs. Merkel was also upset about the NSA and the spying on her phone and on Germany in general. And at the end of the day, the two states, very critical states, the United States and Germany, were very far apart. I now turn to Mrs. Merkel calling for a national dialogue in Ukraine. Steve, can you explain, please, the significance of Mrs. Merkel to the Kremlin, to Vladimir Putin right now? What role does she play from Moscow's point of view?
Let me try, but give me a point of personal privilege. You said that The Nation magazine is edited by Katrina vanden Heuvel and that we occasionally co-author editorials and articles together, and that's true. What isn't true is that sometimes she's known as Mrs. Stephen Cohen. The reality is, more often, I'm known as Mr. Stephen vanden Heuvel.
Thank you, Steve.
So, and it's okay. I don't mind that at all. You and I have talked a lot about the role of Merkel. And you've summarized it. She grew up in East Germany, where the study of Russian was mandatory. She apparently is a fluent Russian speaker. Putin spent his years as a KGB officer, an intelligence officer in Germany. He speaks fluent German. In fact, when he came to power, he addressed the German parliament, and he spoke in German. Imagine that. So there is something to be said, and we've commented on this, for an affinity, even when you disagree, speaking the same language without a translator. They've had a contentious relationship over the years, but nobody has doubted, and we talked about this too, John, when we began our conversations a couple of years ago, that Berlin was undoubtedly Moscow under Putin's most important bilateral relationship, and for Merkel and Germany, Russia was. Secondly, let's remember that though they fought two world wars, that the relationship between Russia and Germany is very close culturally and politically and economically, and has been for hundreds of years. It's something America lacks, but I think there's something larger here. Russia and Germany, even in wartime, shared a common history, a history we Americans never shared. We go there, we fight, we win, we leave some soldiers behind, we come home. We are, in fundamental ways, a provincial country. Somebody told me once that only a third of the members of Congress have passports to travel abroad. Everybody who grows up in an educated way, and even working-class people in Europe, travel to other countries. The affinity between Germany and Russia probably was on the eve of the Ukrainian crisis, and maybe now, the most important bilateral relationship in the West. Putin does not trust Obama. I think he kind of likes him. You know, he was asked by a young Russian girl, I don't think the question was set up, but I'm not sure, at a press conference. I don't know if you know this story. The girl looked to be about 8, 9, 10 years old. She said, President Putin, if you were drowning, do you think President Obama would save you, dive in and save you? And Putin answered, President Obama and I have many fundamental disagreements, but he is a very decent and honorable man. I'm sure he would dive in and save me. It made me wonder if Obama had been presented with that question, what he would have said. But that said, Putin doesn't trust Obama to deliver on his promises, and he trusts Merkel. And that has been, from the get-go, Merkel's essential role, to vouchsafe for any proposal that from the White House that the Kremlin might be interested in. The problem is the White House hasn't made any proposals that the Kremlin is interested in. Now we're in a situation, and I think this was set up between Putin and Merkel, this so-called phone call. Merkel has taken the lead in proposing these roundtable discussions inside Ukraine. That would be mentored, so to speak, or established by Russia and the EU, Germany, in effect. And the White House remains silent. So what you report, I think, about how poorly the meeting between Merkel and Obama went in Washington, which seemed to me at the time to be evidenced by the fact that she mentioned, even though it had happened way in the past, the tapping of her cell phone by American surveillance. She mentioned that when she came out of the White House, was a sign that that meeting had not gone well. And I think it had not gone well in this sense, that Germany wants an end to the armed attacks by the Kiev government, which we control. And they want instead immediate negotiations, not between the United States, Russia, and Germany, but among the warring parties in Ukraine. And that's where things stand. Now, from my way of thinking, Merkel is 100% correct. I also don't understand why she's being so timid about it. I know she is in a difficult position in Germany because Germany is divided on this issue. But it's her moment to be a leader, maybe a historic leader. And she seems retiring. She will say something important and profound and then vanish. And she says it indirectly. Though in private, I guess, based on what you just reported, she said it bluntly to Obama. But it hasn't changed American policy because the Kiev army is still on the march, as you also reported.
We're told that the polling in Germany points to a large majority of German people do not want the sanctions regime to continue. They believe that that is self-defeating. We also have self-interest, Stephen. I like self-interest when you're a capitalist country, and that's why the gas issue is very important and perhaps introduces a timeline here that matters to people. The European Commission has set a new date for the Russia-Ukraine-EU meeting will be announced shortly. Quote, this is from the European Commission spokesperson. The meeting with the participation of the Russian and Ukrainian energy ministers and European Commissioner for Energy Günther Oettinger may be held soon. They're now pointing to May 16th in Athens. Why that's important, Steve, we need to explain to the audience because it is summertime and it is cool in Northern Europe, but it's nowhere near what it'll be come September, October, November. And Europe, especially Germany, is keenly aware that the Ukraine crisis is an unpredictable factor that has to be priced in if there's going to be an eruption in service.
Well, it's not only, John, the weather and the needing for heating, but Germany's industry runs 1/3 on Russian energy. I mean, Germany's industry runs, as does Europe's.
Right.
Industry goes on producing regardless of the weather. Still more, Russia is an enormous market for German goods and Italian goods and French goods. In fact, one of the problems of the Russian economy, it's importing too many foreign goods, from foodstuffs to automobiles. Needs to produce more itself. That's going to be one of the side benefits of the sanctions imposed on Russia. And if they're imposed on whole industries, as Obama wants and Merkel doesn't, it's going to help revive Russian manufacturing. But you're right. I mean, there is an economic underbelly to this whole Ukrainian crisis that's little noted. It's not only Europe's dependency on the Russian economy and vice versa, but it's the economy of Ukraine.
The economy of Ukraine, I'm told, has collapsed, Steve. There is no economy right now. It's out of money. This $3.2 billion, I'm told, is to pay the creditors who are banging at the door, lest they take Ukraine to court immediately to proceed on assets. These are European laws that will not be reversed because there is political disagreement in Kiev, Moscow, Berlin. And when we come back, Steve, I want to speak to that, because perhaps capitalism is a way out. No one wants to force Ukraine into receivership. No one wants a repeat of what we've seen in other nations that are beggared. That will not lead to political resolution whatsoever. And right now, there are headlines coming from London saying the remedy here is not to force the Ukrainian people into conditions that are substandard, so much so that the way forward is violence. Professor Stephen F. Cohen of New York University and Princeton University, Russian history emeritus. We're speaking of Ukraine crisis. We're looking to Berlin, and why we especially look to Berlin is because the dollar, or in this case the euro, speaks mightily. Does it speak louder than gunfire? I don't know. I'm John Batchelor.